warm welcome to this special episode of ETGovernment's Good Governance and Better Security Leadership Series. My name is Anoop Verma. Today, our guest for this special episode is Dr. Veerendra Mishra. He is an IPS officer currently serving as the Superintendent of Police in Datia, Madhya Pradesh. Dr. Mishra is an expert on issues related to human trafficking, transgender issues, framing of social policy, and development of youth. He has in the past served as a civilian police officer in 2 United Nations missions, 1 year in Bosnia and another in Kosovo. He is also the founder of Samvedna, which works to combat caste-based commercial sexual exploitation and human sex trafficking in certain communities. The topic of my conversation with Dr. Veerendra Mishra is the issue of human trafficking and how to deal with these problems. Welcome, Dr. Veerendra Mishra. My first question is, trafficking is a major global problem, and it's well recognized. This problem is recognized by all the political figures and all the social activists. However, there is some controversy about how to define trafficking. So how do you see the definition of trafficking?
See, the definition of trafficking, what we have right now, which we used to be in, like it was part of IPS earlier and now BNS. So, that definition says human trafficking, more or less what has been given in Palermo Protocol, which came into force in 2001. Similarly, a definition was given by Trafficking Victims Protection Act, by USA. And that is the basis on which more than 186 or 190 countries of the world are being ranked, on the basis of how they comply to the minimum standards let in this, their TVPA, Trafficking Victims Protection Act. But the definition that we have right now in place is more or less the same definition which was given there. But a lot of water has flown from under the bridge now. The definition which was given in those days, is very much loaded towards international cross-border traffic. In those days, the Western countries never used to think that domestic trafficking is a problem in their country. What they presumed is that the third world countries are the point of origin. That is the place from where the victims are recruited. And Western countries are the countries where they are consumed and victimized or they're abused. So that is why this definition was very much tilted. It's more focusing on the part of cross-border trafficking. If you see the definition, the strong component is transfer and transport, which we say that in OTD model, that is origin, transit, and destination model, the transit part is a mandatory component there in that definition. But now we have understood, when we start seeing human trafficking, we realize that, okay, it is not necessary that a person has to move from one place to another to be trafficked. For example, like if a child of a lady who has been already trafficked and put in a brothel, and if a daughter or son is forced into prostitution or sexually exploited forcefully, so then it becomes trafficking. The victim is not moving anywhere; they are in the same brothel there. So the mandatory clause of having transit is not necessary now. Very similar is when you talked about our work, the Samvedna's work. So we work with Datia community. Datia community is caste-based sexual exploitation. That is the term we use, CBSA. Caste-based as well as community-based sexual exploitation. The victims do not move out of their villages; they stay there, and in fact, the perpetrators or the people who would like to exploit them come to their villages. So here also there is no movement. So that is why we say that definition to some extent is archaic. Besides that, many dimensions of trafficking is not there in the definition. More or less, if you see the Palermo Protocol definition, it talks about very broadly about sex trafficking, forced labor, and organ transplant. And if you see the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, their organ transplant is not considered to be a trafficking component or dimension. So you can see the gap. And when we start talking about trafficking, now what we have realized after a lot of research, after, when we write about it, we say there are many more dimensions which has added up, to this. Like it could be trafficking for clinical drug trials, trafficking for surrogacy, like I coined the term medical trafficking. So these two components are there besides organ transport. Then trafficking in adoption, that's a big, huge problem. So there are many more issues which normally are missing in the definition. Now the question arises, many of the experts would say that there is a term called slavery or akin to slavery, where we can put anything. But if you ask, somebody who is working on this subject, an executive hand or a practitioner, so they will say that if something is not given in definition very clearly, if it is not vivid, then it's very difficult for us to interpret. And anyway, if you ask a law expert, they will say that if you give scope for the law enforcers to interpret the law, then the chances of abuse and misuse is more. So that is why it is always better that we should update ourselves. There should be a new definition, and we should see that what needs to be added. The definition which was framed and put in the bill, the recent bill, which was again by the government of India, Women and Child Development Ministry had somehow drafted. So the definition was quite comprehensive then.
You have already given some examples of what kind of trafficking that India faces. But can you give me a more broad picture of what is the overall spectrum of trafficking problem that we are facing?
See, that is very interesting. When we talk about human trafficking, we cannot be very parochial in approach. And here I'm taking the country as a parochial approach. Not just localized to, if I'm right now, the SP Datia, I'm not talking about Datia as parochial approach. I'm saying country as a parochial approach, because now the borders, the country borders have diluted or completely got erased when it comes to human trafficking. So the influx of people, trafficked victims from our neighboring countries, it's quite random. It happens, it's random. So similarly, it's rampant, sorry. And similarly, our people going outside being trafficked is happening when we take from Indian perspective. But it is existing globally. Even the girls or the boys in USA can't claim that we are not being trafficked. The domestic trafficking and cross-border trafficking happens of the nationals of all countries, irrespective where they are born. So trafficking, the more we understand this subject, because the subject is evolving, the understanding is improving now, it is enhancing. So more we are understanding, we realize that, okay, trafficking happens everywhere. So let us not use the term like what challenges we face here, but let us talk about what challenges the global, global challenges that we are facing. So one thing what we need to understand is the definition. We have to revisit the definition, because unless and until we come out with a comprehensive definition, as I said, the executive hands of the law enforcement or even the policy makers won't be able to understand or focus on what is required. Second, the challenge is the many of the things which we did not ever think that being a part of trafficking. Like when we talk about sex trafficking, what would be a common man or layman's mindset? If you say sex trafficking, they would think about a girl being trafficked and sent to a brothel, or the, in a very slang term, we say call girls or the escorts. This could be one of way of trafficking. But if you go deeper, then this particular dimension can be reclassified or broken into many more parts. Like sex tourism is a big thing, huge thing. Pornography, where there is no skin-to-skin contact, but it's a huge form of trafficking which is happening. So bride trafficking is not a concept just happening in India. I mean, not that, some girls from other places because of the skewed sex issue would be bought or some other, by some other ways or to some other places they would be moved. It's happening in USA. There are many websites, and the girls from Vietnam, Philippines are being trafficked, brought there, and then they are victimized in USA. So adoption trafficking, if it is happening in India, if it is happening elsewhere, that's what USSR banned way back in 2012-13 international adoption particular to USA. So all of the dimensions, clinical drug trial, nobody agrees that clinical drug trial could be a drug trafficking thing. The Western countries are using the third world countries as guinea pigs. The pharmaceutical companies are, using the subjects of third world countries, and they're not even knowing that they are subject of drug trial. In many cases, surrogacy used to be a big problem. So, these things are not just in India or in any other place. Despite what development stage a country is, but they are equally vulnerable to trafficking, because this problem is generated because of the greed of a human being. And the greed exists everywhere. The more materialistic the country would be, the more greed the person would be having. And that is where the chances of exploitation would increase.
So the way you describe it, then it seems that trafficking is not a purely something that can be solved by purely law and order measures. It also needs some social initiatives and perhaps also geopolitical initiatives in order to solve this problem.
Exactly.
So you were the founder of one organization called Samvedna. So how was your experience of dealing with this problem through this organization?
See, this Samvedna has been working in a very focused area. We normally work with the community called Datia community, as I explained to you. And Datia community is traditionally has been into intergenerational prostitution. So that is one type of trafficking within the sex trafficking range or the spectrum that I talked about. As I said, community-based sexual exploitation. And that is different from the girls who are exploited in brothels, or it could be different from sex tourism. So this is altogether different. So it's a very, very focused area that we work on. But when you talk about how do we address the problem of human trafficking? So as you pointed out about the social initiatives, or should we see everything from criminal justice system lens? So I would say that no, we should not. In fact, the role of the criminal justice system is very minimal when we have to deal with human trafficking. It is basically the social justice system which has to come forward and ensure, because only the social justice system can solve the problem. For example, if I say that, when we talk about addressing the problem of human trafficking, globally, we talk about 4 Ps. That is the prevention, prosecution, protection, and the participation. The participation part is which has been added of late. And it says participation means the collaboration between the stakeholders. So if you see the prevention part, so in one line, if somebody asks me what is human trafficking, I would say human trafficking is nothing but exploitation of the vulnerables. Now the question comes, who are the vulnerables? Vulnerable could be because of many factors or multiple factors, or maybe because of one factor. And the factors are social, cultural, economic, political, environmental, whatever. Now, if at all these factors like social factor, if you say cultural factor, economic factor, poverty or whatever. So, what is the cause of this vulnerability? It is basically it would be the failure of the deliverables of the social justice system. It cannot be the failure of the criminal justice system. So once a victim is victimized in human trafficking, then, the damage is so huge, so deep, and particularly the psychological damage. Because again, when we are addressing the problem of human trafficking, when we come across a victim, what we normally do is we look into their physical harm. That is what the police does. They get the MLC done. So, so that is a medical, legal, and consultancy or whatever, we take a report from the doctors. But actually, we never go and see how much psychological damage has been done. So that is why we need to prevent human trafficking, because the repairing of psychological damage is very, very difficult. And we don't have a very developed structure, neither approach, neither attitude. So what we need to do is, we have to, the social justice system has to come forward, ensure that they prevent. And there are 2 forms of prevention: proactive and reactive preventions. Reactive is once the victim is rescued, then after ensure that they do not again get into trafficking, they are not re-victimized. And proactive prevention is that they are not trafficked at all. So, like, the prevention, the social justice system has a major role to play. Similarly, in protection, the shelter homes are run by my social justice system, and they won't testify if they are not comfortable in, a protection home. And similarly, in prosecution, the testimony and the they would testify only if they are, it goes well with. So if you see all these things, and when we talk about participation also, the other stakeholders in criminal justice system, it would be the judiciary, prosecution, and police, and the rest is all other social justice, women and child development, and many, many, many more departments. So we have to shift the gear. We have to change the lens. We need to start looking human trafficking from social justice system lens. And the best example is Indian example, where this time the law was framed, or I mean, not the law, in fact, the bill. The bill came from Women and Child Development Ministry, not from Ministry of Home Affairs.
You earlier said that this trafficking is a problem that all the nations face, even America is facing. And nation-to-nation trafficking is also happening. So should some international organization, such as United Nations is already cognizant of the issue. They have passed some resolutions and they have also written a lot of good papers on this subject. So should they get more proactively involved in curbing this problem? And perhaps there should be some kind of major initiatives by the world governments or other world bodies to tackle this problem on a global level?
I mean, if you see USA, there is a huge campaign and work going on there. If you see India, you will see so many organizations have started working in this field now. Go to any country, human trafficking is one thing that everybody is cognizant about. UNODC is an organization which has been working for UN. And similarly, ILO, International Labour Organization, is again working in this field. And there are many more organizations which is working. Similarly, there are, ESCAP and other organizations which are working. So there are organizations here. But, many a time what happens is people work in silo. That is the major problem. Every department works in silo. If the Women and Child Development Ministry is working, or the department is working, and the police is working, social justice is working. So, when it comes to human trafficking, everyone has to collaborate. They have to sit together, chalk out what is the role of different stakeholders, and then they have to decide and have a common policy, a common approach. It cannot be different, because the victim is one. You can't have different routes to reach that victim. Then it dissipates your energy. So we have to take one road to reach that one victim and ensure that they are not victimized. If at all we rescue them, they are properly rehabilitated and reintegrated. Another concept is people, many of them don't understand the difference between rehabilitation and reintegration. Once the victim is rescued, they plan to take them back to the place where they have come from. And they said, okay, the work is done. It doesn't happen. That is why there is a lot of re-victimization, because the factors which cause the vulnerability is not addressed. And the stigma attached because of being victimized, it further magnifies so much that vulnerability that they prefer to be re-victimized rather than staying there. So we should not go for integration directly, but in fact, we should focus more on rehabilitation. And that is only possible if all the stakeholders come together. Even the communities have to be, we have to work with the community from where they have come. Even we have to work with the NGOs, community-based organizations, then the different departments. So, it has to be a collaborative work. That is what the 4P partnership is very vital and has to be dominant.
So some of the one of the reasons that trafficking is so controversial at on a global level is because sometimes the people who are economic migrants, or they are fleeing some wars in their country, they can also be labeled as victims of trafficking and dealt with in that manner. So is that an issue? For instance, in USA, people coming from South America or from Haiti or some other poor part of the world, they are often labeled as they are victims of trafficking, but they are actually migrating on their own wish. And sometimes they are also spending some money on moving to a different place. So is that an issue that somehow dilutes the problem of trafficking?
See, there is a huge difference between smuggling and trafficking. When a person moves out of their own volition, and they go to a different country, they pay to go there, then they're smuggled to the other country. So that is not purely trafficking. Trafficking comes only when there is a component of exploitation.
Okay.
But smuggling and trafficking, because trafficking, that too cross-border traffic, not the domestic traffic. But many a times are more or less, in fact, trafficking gets converted into traffic, smuggling gets converted into trafficking, because that, the amount of money which they get through trafficking from a victim by selling the victim is many times more than what they get through smuggling. So if they have a strong network, they prefer to exploit the victim to the hilt. So that is why the chances of trafficking have, in fact, increases. Secondly, when they are moved, dangerously from one place to another, that is not the contract what it was. They never say that, okay, this is how you're going to travel, where you endanger your life as well. So when there is the component of coercion, force, or fraud, then the same smuggling will get converted into traffic.
Okay.
So that is why we call it traffic.
Okay. So, should there be national level social awareness programs to sensitize people about the problem of trafficking? And media can get involved, political movements can be, social movements can be there, and some NGOs can also take a more proactive stance on this.
I think that should be done, and in fact it's being done as well. If you see, BPRND, Bureau of Police Research and Development, is working so hard on trafficking. NCRB is collecting data from the from police and from all places, and even Supreme Court was so proactive in saying that if at all a child missing is not found in in some few months, 4 months, I think. So the immediately the case has to shift to anti-human trafficking unit. The MHA has many advisories for institution of anti-human trafficking units in districts and at higher level. So these things keep happening. So there is a campaign going on. NGOs are doing it, police is doing it, and many organizations have been doing it. So this is happening. Even the subject is being taught, as we did. The Samvedna did a 2-credit course, almost 2-credit course, because we taught for 5 days on human trafficking there in Tata Institute of Social Science. Similarly, we did a 5 days course, and similarly we did with the Jindal Global University, I did a 1-credit equivalent to a 1-credit course on human trafficking. Even the IGNU has started something on trafficking. So it's improving, but we need to put more effort into it. And as you said, the campaign has to go. What I say is, I have got a CCL model. When I work on human trafficking, I call it a CCL model. CCL model is one is conceptual literacy, that it should be spread throughout. The mass should know what human trafficking is, at least basic things, which you can explain them in an hour. Then there is conceptual clarity, the second C. Conceptual clarity is for the stakeholders. To be effective and efficient in handling or addressing the problem of human trafficking, you have to be very clear what human trafficking is. Believe me, more than, in fact, less, more people do not know what human trafficking is. The very definition is not known to them, what human trafficking is. And as I tell you, the definition, don't talk about human trafficking. They don't understand the meaning of human trafficking. These are the things they don't understand at all. If you ask them, they will go by the conventional definition which is given. They don't want to explore any further. So then the purpose is defeated. So we need to, that is what conceptual clarity is. Let us understand in a holistic way what human trafficking is. And then the last is in CCL is after the conceptual literacy, conceptual clarity, then, we have to work together. Liaison, and, we have to work together and ensure that they know how to approach and address the problem.
You also talked about rehabilitation of the people who are the victims of trafficking. Now, in certain areas where, let's say, there is large amount of trafficking over a period of several years or decades, then that can lead to demographic changes. And if people have to be rehabilitated fully, then they must have local support. The locals might not be very supportive if too many people of, even if they are victims, are coming from outside. So how do we deal with this problem? How do we ensure that the local support is there to rehabilitating these people?
See, the concept of rehabilitation doesn't mean that you have to put the person there. Rehabilitation basically would mean that what you need to do is build their capacity and ensure that they are so competent enough that they can strive and thrive on their own. Either you put them back from the place where they came from, or otherwise, if they want to stay back there, they stay back. Rehabilitation means building the capacity of that person. So where you give them training, you give them all these things, skill development or soft skills or whatever. I mean, whatever hard handle or soft skills that you do. Basically, it's a confidence building mechanism as well as skilling.
So how are the other countries dealing with these issues, like democracies like USA, Canada, Western European countries, which are facing their own trafficking-related problems for several decades now?
So there is a major challenge that they are facing. Each country is facing major challenge. And what I think is one thing that they have been doing somewhere they're working hard on is the psychological aspect, where we have something in the books, but not on the ground, that we have to work on. Because we don't have proper psychologists in each place, and every victim should go through a have some psychological experts, clinical psychologists or psychiatrists who can help them. So that part is somehow I think we are facing challenges, and we need to more update ourselves.
Now we are in the age of AI, ML, emerging technologies. So can these technologies help, and satellite surveillance systems, can this technology help us in identifying the sources of trafficking and perhaps coming up with data that can help in regulating this problem and rehabilitating the people?
Certainly. AI has a lot of scope, but only thing is the experts can handle it. We need to work together because, the AI, I don't think so. The AI is in fact used more right now in exploitation than, addressing the issue. So that is again is a problem. There is a concept like I won't say AI, because the voice cloning, or in fact the creation of somebody's image, all these things digitally helping victimize the people more than solving the problem. And another concept which has come out very recently, that there were a couple of cases where there was no one-to-one, it was all virtual digital trafficking happened, and the person got trafficked. So, these are the challenges. Of course, the AIs are posing more challenges than being a solution. But of course, the experts should sit. We can use it as a tool to somehow address it.
I think better economic growth and social awareness, that could go a long way in solving this problem.
See, honestly, this again is a myth that only the poor get trafficked. So that's why I said, the factors like social, cultural, economic, political, and environment. Sometimes the political situation a person is. Political doesn't mean the political parties. That sociologically, the political term is different. So, the power dynamics which works in the family, the power dynamics which works in the community where they live, the power dynamics which works in the villages where they live, the place where they live. That is what the political structure would be. So there also, if somebody becomes weak and they get vulnerable, so, that is one of the causes of migration many times. So similarly, social factors, it could be racism, it could be casteism, it could be anything. Some religious factors as well. The religious factors are We have seen some, places, many things which happen, because of some following of rituals, being ritualistic in all religions. So that again, increases the vulnerability of a person. So it is socio-cultural, economic poverty you talked about. So environmental, if it's a man-made or it's a natural catastrophe, the dislocation, that vulnerability increases, and people, the best. And if you have seen a couple of movies, like, if you take Western movies, suppose, because not many people would connect to Western movie, The Taken. If you see the movie Taken, in that movie, the girl is not poor, who is trafficked by, the perpetrator. It is the situation that made her vulnerable, and that is what is being exploited by the person. So this myth has to be removed. That's why I say, every person, you and me, if we get vulnerable sometime, the trafficker would be smart enough to know that, and they will just, exploit you. So that is why we call it, I call it as a scare model. That's how I write when I explain human trafficking, how the traffickers traffic. I call it scare model. That is, first they scout. How do they scout? They will recruit people at the local level. Otherwise, digitally, they would keep on following you. What are you posting on, websites, on social media? If you somehow, make a hue and cry, say that, okay, I'm struggling, I'm not happy with the situation that I am in. So they will scout. And then what they would do, they would convince you. When I say you, means the victim. They will convince you that, okay, you deserve something better. What you are writing somewhere or exposing yourself to, so that they are going to convince that, of course, yeah, certainly this is what it is. You deserve something better. You should move out. And after doing that, then they would like to, move you of that place, recruit you, as we say that, after convincing. And then they would recruit you and then exploit. So it's a very, very, smart way these traffickers move. It's very smart. They're very strategic in there. That is why we call it a organized crime. An individual just cannot do that.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Veerendra Mishra. It's a very enlightening conversation on what human trafficking is and what is the nature and scope of this problem that we face. So now that the awareness is there and people like you are talking about it very publicly, I'm sure that we can find some solutions going forward by 2030 or later than that.
Yeah, I think certainly. So, we established in Samvedna the first anti-human trafficking lab by the name RACE lab. RACE stands for Research, Advocacy, Capacity Building Against Exploitation. So the very idea is to bring stakeholders to do a lot of research, because many dimensions of trafficking is unknown. Let us understand that, because the policy, unless and until it is evidence-based, so it won't work. And even while you're talking, if it is not evidence-based, then it looks as if you're speculating with things. So research is very much important, and it's an evolving subject. So RACE is what is that focusing on. So let's hope more and more people will come together and will be able to find something to fight or combat human trafficking.
Thank you. Very nice talking to you.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you so much.